Is this a misleading start at all for them, or how are you feeling about Philly?
No, I don't think it's misleading because coming into the year, I didn't know what in the world to make of this team. I don't think anybody did, right? So I just kind of brushed it off to the side and just decided to not really predict what they were going to do. And, people wondered, okay, what's the top 4 in the East? And I would just say Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and the Knicks, because I don't know what the heck is happening with Cleveland. I don't know if Harden or with Philly. I don't know if Harden's going to pull down their season or not. They make the Harden trade early. I think they get a good return for him. They now have wings who defend and shoot. I think Batum is going to be really good for them. And Maxey maybe he's the favorite for most improved player, but he's really taken a leap. You look at the scoring and how voluminous it's been. He's averaging 26 a game, and he's shooting over 40 from 3 on a ton of threes. And he's been a really good scorer. I think his passing has gotten a lot better. He's running that offense now, and that's a huge thing that they miss without James Harden, because Harden is an insane passer and was so important for them, just creating 3-point shots and creating open shots all around the floor, finding cutters, all of that, pick and rolls, all of that. And that burden falls to Maxey now. Man, he's been so good just running the offense. His cadence is better. His patience is better. He picks his spots better. When he first came into the league, I thought he was very frantic to a degree, right? He's really learned how to play the game really well. And he's just, dude's become an awesome player. He's a legit number 2 right now. And so do I think Philly is misleading? I don't think they're going to win the East. They have the best record in the East early. I don't think they're going to have the best record in the East. But I think I'd probably put them back into number 3 in the East, which is where I had them last year. So I guess I probably don't think that much differently from Philly as I did last year, because they got this good depth and they got a better Maxey right now.
Yeah, Fred, I hear you on that. And Philly is the 3rd best team in the East is interesting because that wasn't good enough last year, perception-wise, right? Like, we kind of moved the goalpost now, and I get it, because there's no Harden, because you have promise and potential and other ways that you can take your plan in Philly, if you will. And I'm talking about the fact that front office has they're loaded with assets now. Daryl Morey is going to not even keep his eye out. He's going to pursue every high-end player that becomes available between now and the trade deadline, now in the summer. But they're playing well enough that you kind of wonder, should you let this group cook and see what they can do? And then it's like, even if they don't win a title this year, which certainly the odds would be against, then Joel Embiid can still look out ahead and see optionality, see talent around him. So they're in a good place, all things considered, after going through one of the more dramatic situations we've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I said 3rd in the East. Part of the reason why I said 3rd in the East is because I don't know how to feel about Cleveland right now. Like, Cleveland right now, I think is 3-5. And they're one of the teams where I might be a little concerned with how they're playing, even though they've had injuries. They've had guys out. They've had Garland out. They've had Jared Allen out. 2 tremendously important players. But you watch them and they've gotten sloppy at times, and they're not running as cohesively as I would have hoped. I thought their offseason signings were really good, and it's only 8 games. I'm not panicking. I'm not throwing it on them. I probably want to amend my statement and say I would still pick Cleveland to finish 3rd in the East.
Interesting.
But I'm like monitoring Cleveland.
What about,
I don't feel great about their start.
I actually thought you were going to go down the Milwaukee road, and now we're just adding all kinds of teams to the list. I wrote about Milwaukee in my piece yesterday, and listen, they're 5-2. So if you just look at the record, you say all's well that ends well, but it's been fairly ugly. I thought you were going to say that you didn't know where to handicap Milwaukee. What's your quick 2 cents on the Bucks and where they ultimately take this thing?
The Bucks are they're just such a moving target right now. I mean, like, they spent all of preseason and I was just in Milwaukee last week. Like, they spent all of preseason and all of training camp and all of the first 4 or 5 games of the season completely overhauling how they were going to use Brook Lopez on defense, right? Like, Bud had him in a drop all the time. one of the best defensive drop centers of his era. He's fantastic guarding the rim. He's fantastic when you keep him in the paint. He 29s, 2.9 seconds with a foot in the paint and then a foot up, like few other people in the history of the league. And all of a sudden, Adrian Griffin comes in and wants to start using him away from the rim more, blitzing him and pick and rolls, and he's got to come back and recover. It's just not his strength. It goes terribly. And the Bucks defense gets annihilated to begin the year, in part because, by the way, their personnel is built in a way where they don't really have guys who guard the perimeter, and they have Giannis and they have Brook on the back line. And when Giannis and Brook are straying from the back line so far, you're not really defending the back line. And their transition defense was a disaster and everything was awful. And then 4 or 5 games into the season, Adrian Griffin says, you know what? Everyone was right. This didn't work. We're going back. And so the players said didn't want to do it. The players wanted to go back. So we're going back. And they've been using Brook Lopez in a drop more now. His first game in the drop again was against the Knicks, and he had 8 blocks in that game. And you're like, okay, there are still holes in this defense right now.
Yeah.
It was poetic, honestly. And you're like, okay, there's still problems with the transition defense. There are still problems with the perimeter defense. I'm still really wondering what's going to happen with Chris Middleton, who, we don't know the deal on his health, and we don't know how that's going to affect his role and all of that. I just figure, and Dame has not been hitting shots like Dame, and he's not screening enough with Giannis, and he's not running enough pick and rolls with the bench and all this stuff. But they're still winning because they have so much talent. They're still winning games. And I just figure this was an experiment that was sprung on them just before the season started.
Right.
And they're still clearly adjusting to all of it. And I just figure 7 games is not enough time to adjust to it, especially with a first-time head coach. And 40, 50 games in, I have to imagine great players have a way of figuring stuff out, especially because it's not like they're getting killed all the time.
As long as they don't
have a lot
get
more
ejected for, God forbid, showing emotion. That was absurd
ridiculous
last night.
I have to imagine that official forgot that Giannis already had a tech.
I was reminded that's probably true. I was reminded this morning that that's the same, and the name is escaping me, the same official who allowed Draymond Green to just absolutely scream in his face the other night without any repercussions. Yet, Giannis ended up getting the heave-ho.